Good afternoon, folks, and thanks for coming to Entrepreneurship Live. We have the honor and pleasure of having with us today Elizabeth Bryant, the Vice President for Southwest Airlines University and a key leader for Southwest Airlines. Let me tell you a little bit about her, and I'll keep it short because I can go on forever here. She provides executive leadership for employee learning at Southwest Airlines. Pretty much every hire that joins Southwest Airlines has to go through her unit, and she's key in shaping and maintaining the culture of the organization. She provides strategic direction and oversight for ground operations, in-flight, provisioning, maintenance and engineering, customer support and services, customer relations, technology, customer service, source of support, labor, training programs, everything. At the company, yeah, and all company-wide training initiatives. She joined Southwest Airlines in 1997 and has had served in key leadership roles. Some of the things that caught my eye, she was critical to the implementation of performance management, SAP implementation, and the big one, the AirTran integration. When they purchased AirTran or merged with AirTran. Mm-hmm. She taught business communication courses at Indiana University and College of San Mateo. She holds an undergraduate degree from California State University of Sacramento, mm-hmm. and a master's in speech communication from Indiana University, something that I could obviously use. She does all this and is the mother of 4 young children, and she's on the board of directors for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and is a member of the board of visitors at Catholic University of America School of Business and Economics. So welcome.
Hi. Really glad to be here. Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Is it a little quiet? How's that? Better?
All right. So we couldn't think of someone better to talk to us about organizational culture and the strategic role that culture plays. That's the theme of our events today. So before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about how what you do is related to shaping and maintaining culture at Southwest Airlines? What are the kinds of things that you do in this space?
Well, great question, and probably one I could park on for a long time. So the culture of Southwest Airlines is a very unique one. And how many of you have flown Southwest? Right, so how many of you have had a flight attendant that was fun or interesting or something silly that happened on your flight? You probably haven't had the same experience on another airline, just guessing. And the reason for that isn't because we tell our flight attendants, hey, your job is to be funny. It's really, we tell our flight attendants, be yourself. We want you to be your authentic self every day when you come to work. And by saying that and believing in that and valuing that, our employees behave the way they want to, which is to have fun and to joke around with customers and to make the seemingly ordinary a little bit more exciting. And so part of my role within SWAU is to support the culture that we have at Southwest. It's something that is one that we want to protect. We also want to enhance it. I've been asked before, does the culture change or has it changed over time? And it certainly has. We're almost 50 years old. We don't have the same corporate culture today that we had 48 years ago. If you don't change, you die, which is something that Herb Kelleher taught us. And so it is about evolving and growing the culture, which takes the individuality of each member of our team coming together and bringing their best selves to work every day. And so from a learning and development perspective, we hire and bring in employees that truly believe in the value of taking care of other people. And so I foster that, our team through the university. And so when you're hired, you come in, we talk about the values, the purpose, the mission, the vision of Southwest. And we talk about the commitment that Southwest is making in our new employees. And we ask them to make a commitment back to Southwest to be part of this culture and to help us be successful, for our next 50 years. We meet with employees every single year. And so our instructors, we have about 360 instructors or employees in SWAU, and many of them are frontline instructors that interact with employees across our system every single day. And so something that I tell them is you are not only the instructor, but you are the coach, you are the counselor, you are the guide. You help to problem solve, you help to support our employees in the field. And so we take the role in protecting our culture really seriously because we have kind of boots on the ground across our system every day.
So you're deeply involved in getting people to see what the culture is and then live it and deliver it every day in terms of behaviors. I've been to SWAU, wonderful place, and people who've gone there once they've joined the organization say it's a unique experience. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of what a person encounters when they walk in the door?
Oh, to SWAU?
SWAU,
Yeah.
that gets them to see what the culture is about and what the place is about and what you value.
Yeah, so, we pride ourselves on being a little different. And if you're a new hire at Southwest Airlines, your day one means you come into SWAU. Your first day on the job is visiting us in the university. We have a training facility in Dallas. We have 36 classrooms. All the learning happens there for day one. And so all of our employees stay at one hotel. And we use a shuttle company that brings them in at the same time. And so imagine 300 to 400 employees coming into the lobby of Southwest Airlines every Monday morning for their new hire orientation. Well, the way that we welcome them, we physically roll out a red carpet and we line the red carpet and we have music and we have signs and we have pom-poms and we welcome them with a red carpet experience. And most people love that. They'll have their cell phones up and they'll be filming walking down. Our introverts will get on their phone and hide as they're walking down the red carpet. But most people absolutely love that. And when in new hire, so I speak to most of our new hire classes, and at the end of the day, I say, what did you think about today? What made it different? What made it unique? What made it special? And everyone says that welcome told me that I was somewhere different. And I use that as a way of talking about the experience that they had and now the responsibility that they have in taking such a special experience at Southwest and now paying that forward. And when they greet our customers and when they greet employees, to greet them with kindness and care and respect, because that's ultimately what we stand for.
Very good. Actually, a lot of us have had the red carpet experience on our first day, but largely because there was the installed carpet in our facilities.
Very intentional.
That's right. Speaking of intentional, let's think about where this culture came from, because a lot of our guests here today are thinking in terms of building a culture within an entrepreneurial organization as they set up the organization when they're young in the organization, in the life of the organization. Is culture, this focus on culture, something that's always been there from the start of Southwest Airlines? Or was this something that Herb Kelleher and Colleen Barrett stumbled into at some point and said, hey, wait a minute, we should do something about this?
What a great question. I think it's a both and. So if you're familiar with the humble beginnings of Southwest, you know that we started in Dallas in 1971. We had 4 aircrafts that were, the route system was Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. And so it was that triangle on a napkin you may have seen if you've read any book on Southwest history. And we were losing money. And we didn't have any money for marketing or advertising, or we didn't have a way of recruiting talent. And so we decided, our employees have to recruit talent. They have to be our advertisement. And so Herb Kelleher helped to make the decision that our flight attendants would be hostesses in hot pants and go-go boots. And they would serve love nuts on the airplane and peanuts and love potions, which was free alcohol. And so that definitely generated a loyal following early on because we didn't have any money. It was out of necessity to get creative. At the same time, we had 4 aircraft, well, we were losing one. And so we were going down to 3 aircraft. And we asked our employees at that time, and the leadership did, how are we going to maintain our schedule losing an aircraft? Because if we don't, we're going to go out of business. And so it was our employees who said, I think we can still operate the same schedule, but reduce our turn time to 10 minutes. And that's where the 10-minute turn came from. And so early on, there was this essence of do whatever it takes, work hard, be your best, have fun, get attention any way you can get attention in the public so that people kind of know the Southwest name and will start to come and at least give us a shot. And so there was a necessity early on of survival. At the same time, Herb Kelleher and Colleen Barrett both had a laser focus on people first. And they knew that you were only as strong as the culture around you. So you may have a financial strategy, you may have a business strategy, but if you don't have the right people to execute on that strategy, it's not going to work. And Herb fundamentally knew that. And Colleen, she's the one who really began the focus on the servant leadership concept. And she believed that if you take care of your people, if you genuinely care about your employees, and you care about their well-being, and you want them to be successful, and you set them up for success and remove barriers and grow and develop them, then they will naturally be happier, they will be more engaged, they will want to come to work every day, and that employee will naturally then transfer that to the customer and take care of their customer. And if you have a happy customer, that customer comes back, and you have return business, and therefore you have a happy shareholder. And so it kind of began this philosophy that internal customers come first. We take care of our people first and foremost because they're the ones taking care of our customers. And you can't fake it, right? If you don't have a positive attitude, I can't train you to smile. You either like people or you don't like people. And so we learned very early on we have to hire people who naturally want to take care of others, and then we can train you to do your skill set. But it's the people first, and then they'll take care of our customers.
Now, is that true for all aspects of Southwest Airlines or only certain aspects, such as the people-facing aspects and the like? So what elements do you look for across the entire organization, and where do you allow some flexibility in terms of people's approach to work and how they do things?
Yeah, it's transparent. It's what you see outside is how it is internally. And I would go as far to say that we are fiercely protective of taking care of each other. And I think when you bring in someone who is new to Southwest, who maybe was raised with a different philosophy, there is almost a conflict that happens when they come in the door. And I'll often say, leaders need to go through a corporate detox when they come in the door of Southwest Airlines, because how you survived outside, which may have looked like, it was about title and bureaucracy and where did I sit at the table, and do my meetings, are they taken up with the right people in the organization? That type of thinking will ensure that you are unsuccessful at Southwest. And the success of our culture, I believe, is based on the fundamental value that as a leader, my purpose is to ensure that the people that work in my group are successful, period. And so I serve them. So my job is to make sure that they have the tools, the skills to do their job well, that they know that I believe in them, that if there's a problem, I call them on it, and I care enough to tell them the truth. I remove barriers, and I help them, reach their potential. And if I don't lead in that way, then the employees will absolutely tell me about it, because we don't tolerate it, really.
In terms of, I've gotten this question many times when I've talked about culture and the importance of culture in driving strategy and things. And the question I get from entrepreneurs is the following. Things are hard enough to find in terms of finding good people. Mm-hmm. Now I throw on this culture thing. Mm-hmm. Now it's going to be impossible. How can I be selective? Or is this something that people should just worry about once they're at 50 or 100 people?
Oh gosh, you're too late. I think you're late. I think it's far more difficult to change a culture, like your question earlier, than it is to start from the beginning and build it. I would, to that entrepreneur, I would say culture matters more than skill set. I can train you on almost anything. If you want to be a flight attendant, I can train you how to do that. Ramp agent, pilot, we can train you how to be a pilot. I cannot train you to care about human beings. Your parents either were successful or they weren't. You have it or you don't. And so that's where I would focus my attention, and then you put in a great training program to bring people up to speed. I think you look at potential of people, right? I had a situation, this was about 10 years ago, and I was creating a new department at the time, and there was an employee that was really struggling. She was known as the bully in the department, and she was crazy smart. And I think that there was some fear that, well, we have to, even though there are dead bodies in the wake, it's okay because she knows stuff, and we need her. And we believe that she's someone that we can't not have in the department. And I sat down with her one day, and she said, I know you're hiring for this. This is a position I'm really interested in. And I told her, I said, I think you have all the skills. I think you are crazy smart. You don't have the trust of your peers. And until you can develop the trust of your peers, I can't hire you in this position. And I ended up hiring somebody who didn't have quite the experience that she had, but had the heart. And now this employee has grown, and she oversees the whole department, so she's done very well.
Very nice. Mm-hmm. So in terms of, culture is something that pervades the organization, but there is some leadership on culture that comes from the top. Mm-hmm. Whose job would you say it is to maintain the culture of Southwest Airlines?
Every single employee. We had a campaign several years ago called Own It, and it was an internal campaign that culture is not about an HR program that is put into effect for 12 months in the hopes of changing employee behavior or sentiment. It is not about throwing a party or having an employee appreciation one day. Culture is a million little things that create the overall feeling, as you mentioned earlier, when you walk into an organization. It's the eye contact that people give each other. It's the smiling on the elevator. It's the good mornings that you see. So it is not just one thing. It permeates throughout. It certainly starts at the top. And if the C-level executives do not have a belief in the culture and don't model that, it'll have a hard time, I think, being a lasting culture.
So speaking of a lasting culture, it's been 50 years, mm-hmm. and Southwest has grown tremendously in that time. How has the company made sure that this culture has been maintained over time? What elements have you kept? What have you modified? What's that journey been like?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and it's something that we have truly grappled with over the years. I remember when I started at Southwest in '97, and I was just fresh out of grad school, and I'd had a small stint at IBM, so I worked a little bit in the real world. I was teaching at the time, so I came into this culture, and I thought, first of all, I didn't believe that it was real. I thought in 6 months I'll know what the real culture is, because people can't truly be this happy every day. And it kind of annoyed me, actually. And everyone likes to hug each other, and I wasn't a hugger, so that took me a while to get used to. But when, back then we flew, to Texas. We were just starting to go into New York. We were flown in California for a while. We were very competitive out there. And I remember the conversation, how are we going to be successful in New York City? We talk funny, we have these accents, and New York doesn't, and they're going to not take us seriously. And we made the decision at that point that we're not going to adapt to the city that we're flying to. We are who we are, and it's either going to be successful or it's not going to be successful. But part of that model was not necessarily bringing Texans to New York to deliver customer service. It was hiring great people in New York who could believe and align with the values of Southwest and deliver Southwest hospitality in the New York style. And so that started working for us. And then we thought, well, what are we going to do next? Well, now we're international. We're flying to 10 different countries. And so the small Texas airline, is now one of the largest, airline passenger-wise in the world. And I think it's because we've been able to be honest about who we are and to take pride in who we are and not try to be somebody that we're not. We've also taken some very deliberate measures internally to take care of the culture. And we do that in a number of different ways. We have a group called the Culture Committee that was started by Colleen Barrett in the 90s out of the intent to take care of the culture as we continue to grow. Because we've always heard the criticism that, well, Southwest is a special place to be, but they only have 150 aircraft, or they only fly to 12 cities, or they only. And Colleen knew that if we weren't very intentional about putting in an infrastructure that can support that growth, then we would be at risk. Because the business model of an airline can be replicated. What makes us different, the differentiation for us, is our people, and we believe that. So she put a lot of effort, and I think at one point her title was EVP of Culture and Customer. And so the Culture Committee is a volunteer committee made up of employees around the system that come in and talk specifically about how do we continue to take care of our people and take care of our culture. And so it's frontline. There are flight attendants and there are pilots and there are customer service agents. And then we rolled out a program where there's culture committees at every single location in every single department. There is someone in a department that is championing taking care of their people on a local level. And so, what does that look like? I think it looks like caring and concern for people. When you think about a time where you worked for a company or you were part of an organization where you felt valued, chances are you felt that somebody saw you, right? You felt understood, you felt heard, right? And part of that is individually knowing who you are. And so one of the things that we value at Southwest is getting to know employees on an individual level. And so there are some companies who will say, leave your personal life at the door. This is a professional place. We want just your professional talents here. And I think what we've learned is that you can say that, but the entire person comes in, whether you want to admit that or not. And so why not embrace that, embrace the family? And so when I interview somebody for a leadership position, I will always ask a question, and it's, tell me currently, who are your direct reports? And I say, tell me their names, and they'll go through, Sam, Matt, Jeff, Amy, and I'll say, all right, tell me something personal about each of those leaders. And that tells me if the person that I'm talking to truly cares about the people that they're leading beyond just the workplace. And that really was Colleen setting the tone for that. And the expectation not just at a corporate level, but at each individual location.
Very good. That's a lot of commitment to culture and maintaining it. Every organization says that they value their culture. Mm-hmm. But then when you look at other factors such as the reward system and the structure and other such mm-hmm. things, that's not what you see right. in reality. Right. How does culture factor into your reward system and mm-hmm. How you manage people beyond
it's a good question.
The actual mechanics of what gets rewarded?
It's interesting that you say, I will agree. I mean, culture is kind of a buzzword right now. Every company is talking about their culture and company culture, and it's important to have a strong culture. And, what does that mean exactly? And, several years ago, we started an exercise to better define the values of Southwest Airlines. We hadn't really defined them before. This was about 2005, and we hadn't defined them on purpose because Colleen said, I don't want to limit people. We're hiring you as an individual. I want you to be yourself. If we put a value there, are we telling someone they have to behave in a certain way? And so we went back and forth and decided, since we are growing so rapidly, we have to be really clear about who we are in our beliefs and what is non-negotiable at Southwest. And we did some research. So we went outside and went to different companies and said, what are your values? How did you define your core values? And how do you communicate them? And how do you manage them? And how do you, make sure that everyone is living those values. And one of the companies that we went to was Enron. And Enron had this beautiful marble lobby, and they had 5 values etched in marble in the lobby. And you know what their number 1 value was? Bet you can guess. Integrity. Yeah, right? And so what we learned from that was it doesn't matter what's etched in marble. It doesn't matter what you put in a book and hand to every employee when they come through your door for orientation. What matters is what's in the hearts and minds of your employees every day. And so we simply asked ourselves the question, if I'm on a flight, if I'm in a station, if I'm interacting with a customer or an employee, what do I witness in Southwest Airlines employees? We witness people working really hard, having fun, and caring about each other. And that's how we essentially define the values of Southwest Airlines. And so we call that warrior spirit, fun-loving attitude, and servant's heart. And those are non-negotiable for us. And it's tough. It's a behavioral thing. You may not have a value of serving others, and that's okay. But when you come through the walls of Southwest Airlines while you're here, it's a requirement to do that. So I think through the years we've through an iterative process, we've continued to refine and continue to communicate the importance of the culture and really what the culture is to help to bring that to life for new employees. And we have a lot of employees, Louis, that are 30, 35 years. So how do you reconnect those employees with the culture of Southwest and help them re-engage? And we've been talking recently about our 50th and how we can use that as a launching ground to really help people remember, why did you come to Southwest? Remember that first day you had that red carpet experience? What was that like? And so we're almost talking about like a renewal of your vows, and people kind of sign, their renewal, and it's really the essence of the culture. And here we are.
Have you ever fired anybody for not living the culture?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Across levels?
Oh, yeah. And we'll hire for attitude and we'll fire for attitude. Yeah. And it's more difficult. So typically in a performance management system, it's performance-based. So it's, did you meet your deadline? Did you finish the widget on time or whatever? From a culture perspective, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get this right, because I want to be able to have an honest conversation with somebody and say, if you may have the right performance, but if your attitude and your behavior is in alignment with our values, it's not a fit. It's just as important as how you do your job every day. And so we've actually taken those values and we've created behaviors out of those. So as I'm coaching employees, I can say, when you did this, that did not follow the golden rule, which was putting other people first. And so that is in violation of our culture. And so I like to say we're going to promote you to customer. So thank you very much. And and we've had some employees that have gone down to our neighbor down the street who is a great airline but a very different culture, and it's not for everybody, right? And I think that's part of what culture is finding your fit. Just like UT has a culture and it's a really special place, it's very different than say IU or where I went.
So speaking of your neighbor down the street, you operate in a pretty brutal industry, and when we think about the airline industry, the press headlines are strikes and actions and slowdowns and whatever reason my flight for some reason can't take off on time.
Right.
And always happens to me and turns out to be really a personal thing at this point.
Oh,
but,
no. On us?
No, never on Southwest.
Okay.
Other airlines.
Ooh, I was getting uncomfortable for a minute.
No. I'm talking about this industry, like rife with these kinds of actions, and you hear this worldwide.
Yeah.
So when you choose to operate this way, at the same time, you're also operating in the markets for talent and the like that these companies are. How do you manage to attract exactly the types of people that you want? Do you pay them more? How does that work?
Yeah.
Why do people come to work for you?
Yeah, it's tough.
why do you get that choice? Or do you put in some extra effort to find these folks?
We do. We put in effort. So there's a few things there. We definitely hire tough. We hire for attitude, we train for skill, and we will wait for the right candidate to come along. Even if we suffer for a while, it's okay, because if you get the wrong person, you're going to be suffering on the back end, right? You know, the industry, we do compete with other airlines, but we compete with retail, we compete with fast food. We don't, you know, you'll start on the ramp, say at $12, $14 an hour. And you have to go through a lengthy background check, and it can take up to 2 months sometimes, depending upon kind of your age and how much digging we have to do. And I could go down the street and go to McDonald's or go down to CVS, and I can get a job and start working tomorrow for the same amount of money. So the mining for talent is really challenging for us. I think a couple of the advantages that we have, one is we've never had a layoff, ever, which is unheard of in the airline industry. We are the only major carrier that has never filed for bankruptcy. We have never asked for employee concessions. And so there is direct evidence that we put our employees at the center of our decision-making model. And that does tend to transcend. People get word that this is the best place to work, and we take care of our employees because we do. And when I work with companies who are trying to go through a culture change, they'll say, you know, kind of what's that secret sauce? And, you know, when you do some digging and kind of pop the hood, you hear things like, we have a separate dining hall, or, you know, my parking spot over here, or we furlough employees. It's really tough to have a great culture if you don't know if you're going to have a job, right? And so job security is really, really important. And so I do think we have the halo effect of having, you know, 49 years of success in taking care of our people. We also put a lot of effort. We have over 70 full-time recruiters on staff, which is a lot. Many companies outsource that function. It is the most important decision that we make. And so we put a lot of resources behind ensuring that we hire the right person. There is a recruiter in every interview. And so that consistency for what we're looking for, really important to us. So if I'm a flight attendant candidate interviewing in Orlando or Oakland or Dallas, there's a recruiter in each of those interviews. And so we are, I think, ferocious when it comes to ensuring that we have the resources and the time to hire right.
And as far as I know, you're about, 90% unionized?
We're 94% unionized.
94%
yeah.
unionized. How does that work in a union context? Because
Yeah.
that's the other thing we hear about a lot. Pilots unions, flight attendants
Right.
unions.
Right. You know, it's different. I think we've always taken the philosophy that we take pride in the relationship that we have with our unions. It doesn't mean it is always easy, because it's not. Because when you think about that union environment, that union, they speak for their contingency, right? And then you've got the company. So it almost kind of creates this dichotomy. And so we have to work really, really hard to over-communicate with the union, because at the end of the day, we have the same end in mind. We want to take care of our people. So it's the same principle, same common goal. So we try to align there and move forward. And, you know, we've got negotiations. Right now, we don't have any major contract negotiations that are happening. A couple years, or last year we did with Tech Ops. You might have seen some things in the news with our Tech Ops. And that's how negotiations go. It's part of the process to, you know, hold out and to not agree and, you know, to, you know, maybe walk off the job as a way of speaking your voice. And so we honor that with our employees. It is part of that process. But we treat our employees the same, whether you're a ramp agent under contract or you're in human resources at headquarters not under contract, the same expectations apply.
So turning the attention away from Southwest Airlines for a second, going to a broader level of abstraction, as our students look for jobs, or those of our audience members who have jobs that are looking for other jobs, how high should they place culture in their assessment of the organization? If you wanted to quantify it, what kind of a discount in salary should they be willing to take that exact cultural fit? Like, how important do you think culture is, and why?
Well, I think I would ask yourselves, you know, how important is it for you to have joy in what you do every day? If it's not important for you, if you feel that you can go to work and give your best and check the box and go home and it doesn't matter, then I guess maybe it's not as important. If an integration of work and life is important to you, then I would place culture, very high. And I think it's generational too. It's not the same. So my father was an electric and mechanical engineer. And so he worked in pharmaceuticals for years, and he was an executive with Merck, and Merck for a long time in Syntec. But when I was starting my job at Southwest, his career advice to me was, Lizzie, you got to get them before they get you. And he believed that. I mean, that was what his experience was. And he didn't go to work because he liked it. He went to work because he had to. And when he came home, he was not happy. We had to give him a little time. He was the only dad that I knew that put on earphones, not with any music, just for silence, so he didn't have to hear us. He made a lot of noise. And he needed...
I just learned something today that'll be useful tonight.
Yeah, I can do that. And so he needed to kind of get away. He wasn't happy. And I remember growing up seeing that, thinking, I wonder if that's the way it is everywhere. Is it a choice? And I think when I came to Southwest, there was a piece of him in my ear, and I'm thinking this really can't be true. But I think, you mentioned, my 4 kids, and, I'm involved in the community, and I'm asked the question a lot, why? Why do you take on so much? And, how do you manage all of it? And if I did not work for an organization that truly supported me through life's journeys, I don't think I would. In fact, I know that I wouldn't. It's because I'm in an environment where, life goes like this, right? You have highs and you have lows, and you have times when you need support and times you need to support others. And if it's a company that isn't willing to go there, then I don't think I'd be willing to stay. So very high.
So flipping it to the organization side, it seems logical that culture is important and useful in succeeding in a competitive environment. Why don't more companies, you think, compete based on their culture? Why is it that the companies that really compete based on the culture, like Southwest Airlines, are more the exception than the rule?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think they get it. I think on paper, they'll say yes, because it's very hard to find someone who says having a happy, engaged employee workforce doesn't have a positive effect on the bottom line. I think people understand that. They learn about it in business school. They read about successful cultures and companies and talk about strategy. It's an investment, right? You can't just say we believe in something and not, put some resources towards that. And so I don't think companies are willing always to do that. They want more of a quick fix. And there's a difference between a smart organization and a healthy organization. And if you've ever read any of Patrick Lencioni books, he talks about smart versus healthy. And a smart organization is one that has all of the degrees and the intelligence and all of just the experts in the area, right? And really important to have that. But without the healthy, which is the emotional intelligence and the engaged workforce, then you're going to fail. And there's case study after case study of companies that focus only on being smart, and they don't survive. And so there's so much compelling evidence that culture matters, because the business of business is people, period. It doesn't matter the brilliancy behind it. If you don't have the people executing it and believing in the purpose and the mission, it's going to fail. But I just think when it comes down to writing the check, I think it's harder for some people.
I think when you say the business of business is people, it resonates with the theme that we had for this afternoon, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast, as Peter Drucker said, and or lunch, I guess. But what do you think that actually means, and why do people believe that?
Well, I think because you can look around and you can see, if you just take the airline industry as an example, okay? For many years, there were the Pan Ams, and there were the Easterns, and there was the TWAs, and the Braniffs, and, these legacy airlines that were legacy thinking, right? And there was this sense that they are indestructible. Of course, there will always be a TWA, a Continental, right? You can probably pick one that you've flown in the past that doesn't exist any longer. And the reason, if you go back and you look at why they failed, culture was a piece of each of those. And by culture, it was the lack of respect, the lack of connection with employees, and then among employees. And you mentioned the AirTran integration a while ago, and that was a really interesting study, because if you think about it, at the time we're about 68,000 employees today. We were about 50,000 at the AirTran integration. And we were approaching the integration a little bit differently. Most integrations happen and employees are let go through that acquisition. We made the decision that every single AirTran employee would have a job at Southwest. That was 8,000 employees that were going to be inculcated into Southwest Airlines. And that was tricky, because when you think about it, the 50,000 employees that were here, they interviewed for Southwest. They went through, all of that process to get on board. They went through the training. They were hired, and now we're just going to take, 8,000 employees that didn't have to have it as tough, as I did. And through the integration process, my role in that was to look at a learning strategy. So we had flight attendants that needed to come on board. What did their training look like? What did the pilot training look like? What does customer service training look like? They have their policies and procedures, and they know how to be a flight attendant, but we have maybe different aircraft. So what's the gap training, and how do we train to that? And so my focus was really on how do you take 8,000 employees and bring them into Southwest Airlines. And we worked with a consultant. McKinsey helped us. They were our integration partner. And I'll never forget my training partner through McKinsey. He looked at me and he said, every single airline acquisition in history, the reason it failed is because of training. Because they didn't care about it. They didn't put the time into it. They didn't do it correctly. And I remember that moment so clearly, because I thought, well, that is not going to happen here. And I think it fired me up to make sure that we were really aggressive in our training program, and it actually changed how Southwest learns today. That was the impetus to Southwest Airlines University. We were decentralized from a learning perspective, and that experience kind of moved us into this thinking that we can be stronger together. But I think historically, through an integration, they focused on the details. They focused on, the FAA and what needs to happen and getting a single occupancy and or certificate, and they didn't focus on, but what about the people? And so when you think about seniorities, the union thing was a big deal for us, because if you've ever been part of any type of union environment or seniority, you know that your number, your hire number really matters, right? Because if I was hired a day before you, that means I get, the scheduling. I got to pick my shift before you, or I get paid more, or whatever. And traditionally, take the pilot. So you've got the right seat, first officer, left seat, captain, right? So there's a certain amount of time you put in before you get to move to that left seat. Well, now all of a sudden you're bringing in pilots who maybe are going to take that from you. That had happened at United, and they ended up, they talk about it as the split cockpit. You've got two types of thinking in there, and they don't really want it. They never really integrated, which that's a safety concern for us, right? We want to have one team, in that cockpit. And so we, instead of just kind of stapling them on the bottom or just adding them at different points, we went back and we found employee numbers that matched the date of their employee that we were no longer using at Southwest Airlines, and we integrated them into our system. And so if I'm a pilot today, if I look at your employee number, I don't know if you were AirTran or Southwest. Where in the past they would give maybe another number, and so we took really, I think, focused effort to integrate and to help AirTran feel like they were a part of Southwest, and to help Southwest bring in and take care of our AirTran employees. So we did things like find your mentor. We want you to mentor an AirTran employee, and we did a lot of different employee things to help bring that culture together, because we didn't want to. Because once you have two cultures in an organization, which is typically what happens with an acquisition, it starts eroding it.
Well, that's actually a tough nut to crack, and the fact that you've successfully done it says something very strong about both the operation and the culture. Set aside 10 minutes for questions from the audience about this topic.
I just have a quick question. You talked about Enron, which I found really interesting, and it was funny because I was having a conversation with someone about how Enron's policies were crystal clear and perfect, yet all their employees turned against it, basically. So how do you guys provide feedback and make sure like the culture is strong? So my basic question is like, do you guys, what does that feedback procedure look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, so we focus a lot of attention on developing our leaders and equipping our leaders with the skills and the tools to have open and honest dialogue with employees. It's about coaching, it's about mentoring. I will tell you that the topic of feedback has been one that we've struggled with traditionally, and I think it's because we say we're a family and we love each other. So I love you so much I don't want to hurt your feelings, right? Like your kids were over playing with my kids this weekend, now I have to tell you bad news. Who wants to do that? And so we've worked over the past, I'd say 10 years on shifting that narrative from it's a bad thing or a scary thing to care enough about me to tell me the truth. And as a leader, if I build a strong relationship with you and that trust is there, then the idea of feedback is much less scary, right? If you know I've got your back and I want what's best for you, everybody wants to know how they're doing. I mean, don't you want to know if you're failing or you're not? Right? We all want a grade, right? And so if you're not getting that, then you're kind of bowling in the dark, right? And that's not good for anybody. And so if you have that trusting relationship with your leader, number one, then the feedback, I think, becomes much more natural. And we've moved away from, when you think about talent management, performance management, we moved away from an annual performance appraisal to a quarterly discussion. So once a quarter, it's sitting down, it's part of our conversation. I'm meeting with you every week or every month, depending upon our cadence anyway. Hey, let's sit down and let's talk about how we're doing this quarter. So it's not the whole year has been a problem and you didn't know about it, which should never happen. It brings up the topic of what are you trying to accomplish? Let's look at the things that you've done so far to accomplish. Where are you on track? Where are you off track? And allows you to make that adjustment much easier. And that has gone over really, really well. Great question. Sure.
Ma'am, earlier you were asked what is an acceptable balance between culture and salary for prospective hires. During your interview processes, how do you effectively communicate the value of culture to those prospective hires?
Gosh, that is such a great question. And the people department, who's our HR group, has worked really hard at refining that. Because we weren't doing a great job for a long time because I think we were so proud of ourselves. We thought, well, of course you want to work here. We're amazing. Why wouldn't you want to work here? And so we weren't doing a great job balancing the value of Southwest Airlines. And so now up front, part of the recruiter's role is to talk about all things Southwest. So there is a salary and there's compensation package, but there's also, with that comes, profit sharing, which we've had in effect since 1971. There's a 401k match, which is 10% dollar for dollar. There is a bonus program for all leaders, and there is the culture. And here's what we mean by the culture. There is an expectation that we are going to care about you, that you're going to care about each other. There is an expectation that there's a servant's heart, warrior spirit, fun-loving attitude. That's the first time they hear about the values of what we stand for at Southwest. It's not typically what we've done before. So that has been a change, and I think we've seen an uptick in acceptance. Because it's tough, because I could go, especially in my department, I'm competing with Deloitte University down the street that pays probably twice what I pay. And so I have to really speak to the value of the culture and the longevity of the career. One of the conversations that I have with prospective employees is think about a career as forget the ladder and think about a lattice. You know, if you think about it's either up or out for me at a company. At Southwest, it's I can go right, I can go left, I can go diagonal, I can go down to go over here. You can move, and so you may start in one position, but ultimately you can decide where that journey is going to take you. Did I answer that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay.
I was just curious, some of the things about culture seem a little subjective, and I was curious how you go about measuring some of those things. How do you measure if someone's providing great customer service or caring about others, got all these employees, all these leaders all over the place? How does that sort of get
Right.
quantified or measured to see if somebody's on track?
Yeah. So years ago, so you've heard of Colleen Barrett, right? She was our president emeritus. So she was Herb Kelleher's legal secretary in San Antonio and rose to be the president of Southwest Airlines and the most powerful woman in aviation history. And she was the kind of the mother of our culture. And I remember asking her that question years ago. And I said, Colleen, she was a smoker. Colleen and Herb both smoked. And so she was sitting there, and everybody smoked at Southwest. It was a really strange thing. You walk into a meeting, and people are smoking. I don't even know how to explain it. But so I was sitting there, and she was smoking. And I said, Colleen, how will you know that we're successful? And we were doing a leadership development thing. And I remember she took a hit of her cigarette, and she goes, I'll just know. And, and there's definitely an essence of people talk. Employees, they are not afraid to tell you what they think. Yesterday I had an employee roundtable at a station location where I have 7 trainers, at this location, and we sat around a room, and they told me everything that was wrong. And I welcome that, and I think once they stop doing that, then I know that there's a problem. So that's I'll just know. But there's also other metrics that we use. So we have an employee survey that we utilize every quarter. It's a longer one once a year and a quick one, once a quarter. And employee engagement is a key component of that. And so Southwest engagement sits at about 87%. My department, I get a department score. My department is 93%. And so that is an immediate measure on, culture and on success. From a customer perspective, we've got our NPS. And so we ask customers when they leave, would you recommend flying Southwest Airlines, to a friend or colleague? And our NPS sits at about 63%, which if you know anything about that is pretty remarkable. I mean, having a negative number is actually pretty common. And so those are a couple indicators that we use. We also do things like State of the Union, where our CEO goes and has conversations with employees, and he essentially talks about the state of the business, and then it's an open Q&A format. It is anything goes. What do you want to ask? And you certainly get a pulse of the organization, through that as well. So there's some quantifiable and more qualitative ways that we look at it.
I have a question. At what point do you say that you can't change this culture? Like, I can't do this. Have you had anything like that? You tried to change something and you just could not?
From a culture perspective?
Yeah, you're trying to change the mindset of people in your organization.
Oh, that's a really interesting question. There have been times where, so the example that comes to mind is low cost. So we are a low-cost airline, period. And there was a period of time where our employees focused a little bit more on taking care of the customer and hospitality, which really is important. But let's do that with a low-cost mindset. Let's not give away tickets all the time, right? Let's make sure that we have a revenue. If we don't make money, we're not going to be here any longer. And so we, through that effort of raising awareness of the importance of low cost and the role that every employee plays in a low-cost environment, was about a 2-year effort. That included online CBTs, it included classes, it included leadership sessions, it included lots of communication. We started, metrics really matter to people, and so we started putting kind of a low-cost metric at each location, and so it became part of the vernacular of our employees. But that was something that we knew we needed to change, and I think that's a culture piece. That's a really interesting question. I think it would be harder to answer that if there was a real problem from an integrity or a value perspective. I think one of the benefits that we've always had is our employees, they believe in the authenticity of our leadership. And if that were to change, I think it would be harder to shift that.
Well,
Good question.
great. So, last one.
Oh, sorry, one person ask more question. I was just curious on if you have any advice for taking good culture and continuing to, I guess, increase the behavior, if you will. I don't know. It sounds like some always have sort of a great culture, but I don't know if there's ever a point where if we want people even more involved, or if you can provide any sort of advice on that.
I think culture is always evolving. To think that culture is stagnant would be a mistake, right? I think recognizing that our environment is changing, our society is evolving, expectations of our customers are changing, expectations of our employees are very different than they were 10 years ago. And when you think about what the boomer expects in the environment versus a Gen X versus a millennial, very different expectations coming into the workplace. The millennials, it was so interesting, 10 years ago we were thinking, oh my gosh, the millennials are coming, what is that going to do? And we're so scared, and they can't make a decision, and they're never going to be loyal, and all this kind of crazy stuff. And what we've learned is the millennials within Southwest have truly changed. They've helped to change our culture in a way that has been so positive, because the millennials, technology is like air, right? They want answers right away. That's why we went to the quarterly PAs, because the millennials like, what's this once a year stuff? I want constant feedback, and I'm craving that constant feedback. And so I think a culture has to adapt and change to the employees that are participating in that. And so if you stay rigid with this is our culture and you have to adapt to our culture, I think that's when you can run into some friction. I think you've got to be open, to change, and agility is part of that.
Thank you. This has been very interesting. It tells us that managing through culture, making culture strategic is hard work, and it's constant vigilance. But I've been bullish on Southwest Airlines since I first heard about it in 1991 or 92 when I went to business school. And my prediction is that given its history and the attention it pays to culture, that when you grow to 136,000 employees, when you double in size, it'll still be successful and integral to the success of the company.
Yeah,
So
we're trying.
thank you for coming and sharing
Thank
your
you.
thoughts about how this is
Thank
done.
you.